Hi, this is Wade Kloos. This video shares a recent presentation I gave at the Northwest GIS Users Conference in Bremerton, Washington in October of 2018. This session also featured Greg Babinski with King County, Washington. You may have heard of the GIS cost-benefit study contracted by King County. It was one of the first and really one of the most comprehensive efforts to assess the fiscal impact of implementing a large county GIS program. And it was no small undertaking. It involved numerous face-to-face interviews, a broadly distributed survey, and detailed cost accounting. What I appreciate about this pioneering study was that it revealed the magnitude of benefit that GIS could provide. In this case, an estimated $776 million of net benefits over the program's 18-year history. Despite this impressive monetary impact and the promotion of this accomplishment in GIS trade publications, there really was not a groundswell of similar return on investment documentation from other GIS programs. And that raises the question of why. My presentation sheds some light on the question of why GIS ROI seems to be done so infrequently, if it is even done at all, and provides an alternative method for documenting GIS results. I'm interested to learn a little bit more about why you're actually in the room. You obviously are here because maybe it was the ROI buzzword that attracted you. Maybe it's Greg's charisma that brought you into this room. But I'm going to guess that there's something about ROI that interests you. And I'd like to just get some feedback from you real quick. A couple of people. What is it about ROI that is of interest? Yes. Survival. Okay, that's a good one.
It gets upper management's attention.
Upper management attention, very good. Anything else?
Difficult to quantify, like what GIS can do.
Okay, very good. Hard to quantify. Okay, so now another question. What would you hope doing GIS ROI would change for you at your organization?
Funding.
You want, what about funding? More clarity?
Stable.
Stable. Okay, so get rid of the threat of decreasing resources. Excellent. What else would you want to change?
It's kind of in our agency, it's kind of a second thought.
Okay.
So it needs to be more up front, needs to be more injected into projects in the beginning and not an afterthought.
Is that a problem from the GIS side or management side?
Management side.
Okay.
So that's why I was thinking the ROI, you could show them the benefits of the GIS before you start a project, or have it be involved as part of that piece of a project. You
Okay.
have planning, you have utilities, there's no GIS.
Oh, okay. Okay.
That it's kind of like respect and recognition as a player.
Excellent.
As a
Right.
contributor.
Great. Part of the business support function of the, okay.
Sometimes they still think of it as a pretty picture.
Excellent. Okay, to change their perception of GIS. Great. All right. Well, thank you for that. I appreciate that because I always learn something even though I'm the one talking most of the time. I try to not talk all the time. Okay, so now another question for you. Has anybody besides Greg done an ROI study for their organization? Crickets. Crickets. That's okay. Has anybody contracted besides Greg for an ROI study? Excellent. You guys I commend you for being in the right session. Okay. That's all fine. Fine and good. Because what I'm going to do is I'm going to present just a different approach. So, Greg's experience, I commend him for overcoming the obstacles of having to go through that. But I'm going to take you on a different journey, and maybe it'll be valuable. It may not be always applicable, but it is nonetheless somewhat interesting. Okay, so assumptions about ROI today. You've mentioned some of them already, but I am interested if anybody else had something else they want to say about their basic assumption about doing an ROI today. We heard that it was very difficult to quantify GIS, so you're not quite sure how best to do it. Anything else?
We would need access to, I guess, management numbers. In other words, FTE, how much money's rolling out the door, what they're doing, all that sort of stuff.
Okay.
A lot of things that managers just don't want to talk to people about.
Okay, the specific business data that we need to collect as part of our assessment. Okay, so real quick, what I want to do is just kind of begin to move through some of these assumptions that we've heard and a little bit more exploring on this. So it can be very difficult to derive the full scope of GIS benefits that could get delivered. Sometimes it's easier to see costs, but not so easy to find actual benefits. So I can appreciate that. And you're going to need to talk to people. And sometimes that is even a stretch to do. You're hoping that people remember. You're hoping that people have time for you. You're hoping that they are not necessarily hostile towards you. Okay. And usually to kickstart GIS, you need some type of a motivator. You need some type of a project or investment to kind of justify the level of effort that an ROI requires. Would you agree with that, Greg? Okay. All right. And chances are, if the stakes are high, then you're going to want to bring in an independent, impartial opinion. And therefore, you may need to go out and find some funding. Okay, so just some general assumptions. Okay, so I want to share with you a different way to look at it. It's along the same lines, but it starts with the birth of a GIS program, okay? And maybe, just maybe, at the beginning, there was somebody who said, let's try to justify this birth, this investment. You guys all did this, right? Okay, so we know maybe not. So I want to share with you my GIS birthing example. Early 90s, I'm starting my career as a city planner for a newly incorporated city in Southern California. We were in desperate need of our first land use map. Being the geographer in the bunch, I raised my hand. I brought out my Leroy lettering set from my college cartography class, and I was ready to go. And all I had was Pantone color sheets. You guys remember these adhesive Pantone sheets, chart tape, and a blown up version of some Rand McNally type of a base map. Our city boundaries were nowhere to be found on this map because we were newly incorporated. What I would have done for the base maps that we have today. So I was thinking there must be a better way. So I researched GIS options, and again, this is the early 90s. Fortunately, my community development director said, great, let's do this, buy the cheap one. So we told Intergraph to go pound sand, and I bought $1,000 worth of ArcView. Now, here's the moment of truth. What did we do to justify $1,000? We did absolutely nothing. In fact, that was part of our strategy. It was to stay under the radar from Dr. No. He was our finance director. And he had heard all the horror stories about GIS implementation in the early 90s, giant sinkhole of public dollars. That was his perception. So we were low-tech GIS, and we set even lower expectations. That was our GIS motto. Okay, so now back to this amazing diagram. Your GIS program is now a teenager. And like a teenager, GIS was, does anybody want to fill in the blank? Immature, obstinate.
Stepchild.
Okay, I was kind of going along the lines of struggling with identity issues. Challenged to define its purpose or the meaning for its existence. And perhaps, just maybe, again, here's this question mark of an opportunity that somebody could have the courage to look back and identify what was that return on investment. Did we use the public's dollars wisely? Does that sound at all familiar to you, Greg?
Yep.
Okay. All right. And the reason that you would do that, just maybe, is because you've got a pretty big aspiration for the future of your GIS program. And then maybe at some point in the future you do an ROI. So can you see during the lifespan of this program, you've got like 3 opportunities to do things traditionally that motivates an ROI study. But as we learned, maybe you do them. We didn't do it at my little city. And when we were a teenager, well, I wasn't working there at the time, but I can tell you they haven't done it since. They certainly didn't do it at the beginning. So can you begin to appreciate, does that seem to resonate with you folks? Okay. Now, the problem with this approach, though, is that there are a lot of years going on, and there is a lot of business benefit being delivered in between these potential studies. So this represents a problem because I would suggest that GIS continuously produces business benefit. So my assertion is this: why not engage in an ROI process that matches the pace at which GIS delivers business value, instead of once every 10 or 15 years or greater? So I wanted to give you just another look of how we can begin to do this. Okay, so, but in order to do this, we really need to challenge and tear down the mental barriers that we have and assumptions that keep us from growing and learning a better way to execute the business side of GIS. And this is what I want to propose, is that these are not always necessarily true. Even though they seem, and we agreed, they all seem to make sense, but they don't have to be that way. And so we find ourselves here, kind of a new approach, perhaps a better tool. So I want to share with you this solution, a solution that can help you communicate in a continuous fashion your GIS results and impacts. This tool is, in fact, just a spreadsheet. And it only weighs in at, well, 1 page. But it packs a very powerful punch for your GIS program and for you personally. So, despite all of the types of GIS projects, there are usually the same business variables that GIS impacts. So it asks relevant workflow questions. It wouldn't be a spreadsheet if it didn't do the math for you. So ROI is all about the numbers, the things that you can count. But this ROI process also captures the quality impacts GIS produces. Perhaps the most significant output from this one-page process is that it identifies both of the qualitative and the quantitative components. And this is really your stepping stone for communicating with your executives. Unlike, well, to be quite honest, Greg, I read the King County study. It took me a couple of times to read through it, to appreciate it. But even still, I'm not sure I'd want my executive to have to read that. So I don't mean to pick on you, Greg, because you're the only one here that has attempted this, but it's very difficult. But I want to stress to you how important it is to have a communication device for your executives, something that is simple, straightforward. Okay. So if you want this, here's the URL. I'll give you a little bit of time to write that down. It's as short as I could possibly make it. And just in case you may be changing the way bit work gets done out in the field with drones, here's the drone version of this report. Just happens to be another one of the fun things I get to play with. And so it occurred to me, every time we redefine how field work gets done using a drone, that we are delivering a return on investment. Well, that is what the One-Page GIS ROI is. But it doesn't really tell you or explain why we created it. In other words, what was the problem? The only reason to do something is to theoretically solve a problem, right? Well, as the GIS director, I could not define to our executive leadership the details of how GIS is delivering value to our organization. So it made me just ask the question, why? Why is that the case? Why can I not communicate? The answer that I found was no one was documenting their results. So again, another question, why? I think the answer to that was nobody was asking for it. The result was GIS was obscure and generally misunderstood. So you wonder why you're referred to as the map people? People don't know any different. And this was the culture at DNR that we were interested in changing. Okay. All right. The best way for me to explain to you what this one-page ROI approach does is to walk you through an example. All right, so I need to speed this up a little bit. First, a quick run through of the sections that are a part of this template. Don't worry too much about reading it. You can download the example itself that I'm going to be referring to. But it has an executive summary, which you would write last, a description of the current workflow or the business limitation. The GIS enhancement is explained. There will be the math part, the spreadsheet, sections for the tangible benefits to the organization, as well as outside the organization. There'll be a measurement section and an observation section. And finally, there is a management confirmation section, because we didn't want GIS people making claims that management doesn't buy off on. The example that I'm going to share with you is called the Routine Technical Assistance Geoform. Sorry, it's just one of those things, but it was created for our forest stewardship program. We have 6 foresters located in 6 regional offices throughout our state. The U.S. Forest Service funds this program whereby our foresters provide technical assistance to private property owners with forested land for the purpose of better managing those forests and for conservation. Now, I know what you Northwesterners are saying. Utah, really? You have forests in Utah? We'll show you some forests, right? So I won't be reading this whole report to you, but I do think it will be valuable for you to hear how the business side of GIS projects can get verbalized. So it may be helpful to you to close your eyes while I read these sections, just so you can focus on these benefits. Okay, this is the executive part. All our division foresters conduct technical assistance under the U.S. Forest Service funded forest stewardship program, but there is no central or consistent mechanism to record this work effort. Without a uniform process for recording field notes and call-in requests, the program's data quality was inconsistent and the resulting workflow was more laborious than it needed to be. Since this program data was aggregated infrequently, the Forest Stewardship Program Manager had no way of knowing throughout the year what stewardship work was being performed or where in the state it was or was not happening. Okay, you can open your eyes. the formula for this compelling executive summary is to concisely state the problem and the problem's impact to the organization. That's what I just read to you. The other part of a good executive summary is the solution and the solution's impact to the organization. Okay, now let's look at the numbers, the math part. Yeah. Now, this is like the game of Clue. You collect hints as you move through this process until you find the only possible result, your GIS result. We are following the basic premise of ROI for GIS. We identify where the cost of doing business, what the costs of doing business are before compared to after GIS is implemented. So let's go through the evidence, and we begin with your project inputs. Okay, so what we're going to look at here is just this area that I have in the highlight. The current workflow. It currently takes half an hour, time spent on data entry. Now this is from the foresters, not the GIS people. These are the folks telling you, generally this is what it takes. Sometimes it takes longer, sometimes it takes less. But this is their number. We need to identify an hourly wage rate. There's a little asterisk next to that because down on the bottom of this spreadsheet is just some general wage assumptions. We don't want GIS people asking other people how much they make. So we make some general assessments because consistency is more important than accuracy in this case. And it occurs 588 times a year. All right, the enhanced workflow. They cut the time down to 0.2 of an hour, same $25 for the Forster's rate. We're using the baseline again just to show comparison. And then in the purple, the enhanced production cost. And you can see how really simplistic this is, isn't it? But it's a geoform. Anybody done a geoform? Super, super simple. Okay. Now, the numbers over on the right side of the screen are calculated for you. You don't have to do the math. It's already done for you. With a little bit of basic arithmetic, we wind up with 138% return on investment the first year, and because that $100 cost is not there the second year, it's 144%. Okay? Pretty straightforward, I think. But I'm going to spend just a little bit of time explaining the math part, because I do not want this to appear to be a black box to you. Okay? This is so that you know really what is happening inside this spreadsheet. So full disclosure, there's nothing to hide, and it's nothing that's hard to understand. On the contrary, again, apologize, Greg, for using you as an example, but the difference between Greg and my solution is Greg was showing you geometry with that box, right, and the triangles and the rectangles. And I'm just dealing with addition, subtraction, and division. Pretty basic. Okay, so these are the numbers from our geoform example that you saw. And using a standard financial definition of ROI gives us this equation. A minus B divided by B, right? A, savings, minus enhancement cost divided by the enhancement cost. This is what you will find in most financial investment decisions. But as you will recognize, D did not show up on our spreadsheet. This 4,210% rate of return, or I should say return on investment. Now, can you put that into context? That kind of an improvement? What if you had to explain that to the leader of your organization? Would you want to be in that situation? Is this even feasible or plausible? This is why the GIS ROI spreadsheet does not use this equation. This is the equation in the spreadsheet. The difference is the inclusion of all cost associated with the new and improved workflow, column C. This is the variable that should be considered relative to the gain or savings. That's the numerator. So you need to have this to compare. Does this make sense?
How is D calculated?
By this equation, the first
See,
equation.
okay.
Now I'm saying stay clear of it.
Yeah.
We want our evaluation to be inclusive of the entire workflow that we've just influenced, so we can express the gains holistically, not just an investment of $100 of staff time. Does that make sense? Okay, so let's just take a look at what happens when those ROI numbers go up and down with a change in the magnitude of the workflow cost, column C. Can you see what the problem is? When you don't factor in that new improved workflow cost, your management would soon be expecting GIS program to walk on water. They would not be getting a meaningful or realistic representation of the GIS impact. The calculation in the template is what I would call credibility insurance. Now, this kind of conservative ROI calculation is nothing new in ROI studies. You may call it declining marginal value or benefit discount factor. Whatever you call it, it is always better to underpromise and overdeliver and not the other way around. You want to build the foundation of trust, not erode it. Okay, so the last point I want to emphasize about the resulting ROI number is do not overemphasize it. It is an interesting characteristic of your GIS project, but it cannot begin to explain the scope and the depth of your GIS results. For that, we need to dive back into our GeoForm ROI example. Now, this section of the ROI report, the benefit part, this is where the magic happens. This is where you take what you have come to understand. Do you remember your detective work about a given business limitation? And you weave into that your GIS cause and its business effect. So don't read this part. That's my job. Otherwise, we fill the room with echoes. Benefit 1. Removed a poorly functioning workflow that left management blind for most of the year and freed up 176 hours of staff time. Benefit 2. Created standards for data entry that improved data quality and quantity. Now, foresters track trends, new capability that they did not have before, and determine areas that require attention. For example, more responsive to needs and opportunities, and this is new operational insight. For the first time, management has 24/7 awareness of this program's activity and progress towards operational goals. Benefit 3. Provided an application with a friendly user interface that staff actually enjoy using, compared to spreadsheets and numerous email communications that were necessary before to report activities. As a result, the program provides a more comprehensive view of staff activity and the benefits that come from it. Now, you can open up your eyes. Can you see yourself drafting words like that? You can do this. This really is not difficult. Did you hear how a modern and simple to create web GIS solution replaced outdated modes of office and field work, and while at the same time created more capacity to do work? It also established new capabilities that any manager would be delighted to have. Now, at DNR, business benefits like these are transforming our organization, one program at a time. So that ROI return of 138% pales in comparison to these business benefits. Do you all feel that? Good. All right, now let's talk about metrics, the measurement part. So what could I possibly say to inspire you about measurement? How many of you are intimidated by the thought of creating measures? Or maybe you work with people that are just hypersensitive about being measured. So I understand it can be a tough sell, but not to progressive managers, because it's management's job to measure the things they care about, but oftentimes they just don't do this. So the better GIS professionals can anticipate and find measurement opportunities, the more value they can add to the business. And it may not be as bad as you think. So I will read through our example one last time, so close your eyes and listen. There are two sections for the measurement part. The first part is meaningful measures of success. We can now quickly and easily query and measure the stewardship database to determine where, when, and how many technical assist records have been completed and by whom. This is a new measurement capability to assess program effectiveness. With regards to the validation of this ROI report, we can periodically test for how much time is saved by using the GeoForm method of data collection. The second part of this measurement section is measurement observations. Now, the time interval can vary based on the project, but typically it's done within the first 6 months and then every year after that. So I only want to read to you one of these observations. This is 1 year after the deployment, February 2018. After 1 year, we have determined it takes considerably less time for the foresters to process data collection using the GeoForm than was originally tested. We now complete that process in less than 5 minutes. This efficiency saves approximately 231 hours of work, lowers the labor cost to perform data collection, and thus providing more time for foresters to improve the state's forests and help our residents manage their forested properties. Using this new workflow cost information, the annual ROI now yields a 468% return. This roughly translates into a workflow that operates 3.5 times better than the old way of doing business. Now, I want to thank Sean Edwards for allowing me to share his ROI work and recognize not only his skill in producing the spatially enabled business solution, but also his talent in creating this ROI and benefit report. I also want to recognize Sean's boss, Buck Ehler, who also played a part as the manager of GIS staff. He saw the organizational value that gets defined by investing in GIS project ROI like this one. And he now has the expectation from his team to produce this kind of study. In the final analysis, GIS people work on numerous organizational activities, and you apply your organizational capabilities, and those are generally described in the pyramid on the left. Those activities produce outcomes, generally described on the right. And those outcomes have some degree of organizational value. But it is only through the measurement and documentation of your results that you, the GIS professional, provide clarity to your organizational leaders so they can come to understand the actual value GIS delivers. So if you do not measure and document your GIS results, all you are left with is this. Just the list of what GIS could do. There is no clarity on the outcomes GIS produces, and no basis for determining the organizational value of your GIS program. But it doesn't have to look like this. And it's only 1 page away. Now, compared to the infrequent or non-existent ROI studies, this 1-page GIS ROI approach offers many advantages. You get to focus on one enhanced workflow. Just one workflow. Not all possible spatial functions of every program, of every department within your organization. You get to discover actual business data. Therefore, you have greater confidence in the accuracy or the relevancy of that business data. They're not assumptions and not estimates of benefits from years ago, because this represents a fairly modern example of your work. It's easy for you and your management to understand because there's no complex numbers or finance terminology, and believe me, your management will thank you for that. And this does not take you long to complete. You can add additional costs or benefits where needed because it's just a spreadsheet. And you can start this process without a huge organizational commitment. You only really need a couple of people to collect information from. And it's not a broad and lengthy participation program that your organization has to commit to. The typical big GIS project or organizational initiative are really not necessary. All of your GIS projects have the potential to generate positive ROI and benefits, and you get to choose which projects you want to focus on. You really can do this solution, and I bet it's going to be easier than you think. You don't have to ask for consultant funding. It only requires your time. And there are a lot of reasons to do ROI studies yourself. And here's the list of the benefits that you get. But the bottom line is this: no one else in your organization will do this for you. The norm is just to keep doing things as they are, and that's easy. But it doesn't provide your management with a very clear view of your impact. Now, my personal favorite benefit that you gain from this list is that you get to claim your results for your portfolio. You get to keep them. Nobody can take them away. And that gives you an advantage over others by proving your business value and that you know how to articulate your business value. That makes you look damn good to existing and future employers. So I end on this slide because I believe you and your GIS program will be rewarded for taking action and generating momentum for more meaningful GIS opportunities. So when you communicate the business value that you deliver, you get management's attention. And then they will begin to see GIS differently. Not as mappers, as we talked about earlier, but as effective change agents that can fix and improve their operations. So they are more likely to share more about what their needs are and ask for more GIS involvement. And this is where you begin to apply your spatial problem-solving skills and deliver higher value solutions. You'll spatially enable workflows, and from there, you repeat your ROI investigations, hopefully using the simplified and manageable approach to GIS ROI. So, with the wheels of GIS turning at your organization, the only question that remains is, where next? Right? Isn't that the motto of this year's conference? Where do you want your GIS program to go from here? Because if you document your GIS ROI, you will start to build evidence that defines your contribution. And I expect you will learn that GIS is actually shaping your organization's culture. And that will change the way leadership sees you. So now you can tell management where you want to go, and they'll be a whole lot more receptive to that. So that's my presentation. Thank you very much for your time.